So how can we load the tasks for a user with help of that user ID? Well, as a first step, I'll inject the tasks service by calling inject and injecting the tasks service. And with that done, user tasks here can actually be set to a computed signal here, in this case, since I'm using signals. Otherwise, you could use a getter, for example, but here I'm using computed. And then in there, we want to reach out to the tasks service, access the all tasks signal, and then we can call filter on that array of tasks that's managed by this signal to find all the tasks that belong to this user. So filter will execute a function on every task in this all tasks array in the end. And I want to filter out and get all the tasks where the user ID is equal to this user ID. And since I'm reading the all tasks signal and the user ID signal in this computed signal, Angular will automatically recompute this signal whenever the tasks or the user ID changes. And as mentioned before, alternatively, if you're not using signals or if you don't want to use this approach, you could of course also set up that subscription to the param map as you saw it before and use observables and regular properties for getting your user tasks. Here I'll use the input and this computed signal though. And with that, we just need to read the user tasks here in the template. And if you then save it all, you will see that for different users, different tasks are being loaded. And that's therefore now the behavior I want. As a next step, we can therefore make sure that we also allow users to add new tasks. So to allow users to add new tasks, we should go to this new task component. And in there, you already find quite a lot of code. I already have some signals in there, which are connected to a form and its inputs with help of two-way binding. And then in onSubmit, I'm calling add task in the tasks service, which is a method that will create a new task. So that's all already here. I also already expect the user ID as an input. And since we did enable this strategy here, which ensures that child routes do get dynamic path parameter values as inputs by Angular, since we did that, this user ID will be set here. So that will be extracted from the path that's currently active. And therefore, this should all already work, and adding tasks should therefore already work. And indeed, you can give this a try. If you go back and you enter some task data here, if you click create and you then go to a different user and come back to this user, you should see that task here. And it should also be there if you reload the page because it's getting stored in local storage. That's all already working. But of course, it would be nice if after clicking create, we would automatically be navigated to this tasks view here. And the same should be true if we click cancel. There, I also want to be able to go back to that tasks view. And I will start with the cancel button, because that actually is already a link. And therefore, if we want to go back, all we have to do is add a router link and set the appropriate path. And here the path can be ... That's a special router link syntax supported by Angular, which essentially tells it that you want to go up one level in your route path. It will essentially remove the last segment of your route path. So if you're on users, u3, tasks, new, this will get you to users, u3, tasks, for example. So that's a nice little feature offered by Angular to simplify relative navigations like this. So that's the cancel button working. What about the create button though? That is a real button because it indeed needs to be a button because it submits the form and it triggers onSubmit therefore. So here we have a new use case. We now need to perform programmatic navigation, which means we don't want to navigate with help of a link, but instead we want to trigger a navigation action from inside our code. And that's also a common requirement and therefore something that's supported by Angular. So therefore all you need to do to navigate programmatically is inject a router service, which is offered by Angular. So the thing you inject is just called router. And that is imported from @AngularRouter. And with that injected, you can go to the place where you want to trigger that navigation. So here in this case, the end of onSubmit. And call this router navigate to, guess what? Navigate. Router also has some other methods and properties you can use to interact with the router, but navigate is one of the most commonly used methods. Because navigate then takes your navigation commands and then possibly some extra configuration. And therefore here I'll pass an array to navigate, because these navigation commands which it wants should be an array. And this array is the same kind of array you could also pass to router link, where you can specify your different segments like this here. In this case here, I want to navigate to /users, then the current user ID, and then tasks. That's how we could construct our array here. And then you can also pass a configuration object to navigate and configure various things. For example, you could also add query parameters if you needed to, but you can also, for example, set replace URL to true to make sure that this navigation action essentially works like a redirect and ensures that the user can't use the back button to go back to this page where they're coming from. Because sometimes you want to disable that, especially after a form has been submitted, so that if the user clicks back thereafter, they're not taken back to this new task component here. So here for demo purposes, I will set that to true. And with all that, if you save that and you go to a user and add a new task like this, and you click create, you see I'm automatically navigated to this user tasks page. And if I now would use that back button, you see I'm taken to some other pages, but not to that new task page. That's what replace URL does. Now with that, we added all the task-related functionality. We can view the tasks, we can add tasks, and this complete button also should already work, because that has nothing to do with routing. But there still are more routing-related features, which we'll explore next. So what else can we do with the Angular router in this application? And what else should you know about the Angular router? Well, for example, how we can handle the scenario that a user tries to visit a page that doesn't exist. At the moment, this will lead to us going back to that starting page here, but that might not be the behavior we want. Instead, Angular allows you to define a so-called catch-all route, here as a last route typically, where you set the path to 2 asterisks. And this route will then be activated if no other route is met. So if no other path matches the path that's currently entered in the URL. And you can then specify your fallback component. And for this application here, I actually prepared a component I want to use for that, a component you find attached, the not found component, which I'll insert into my app folder next to the header. This is a component that simply outputs some fallback text. And with that component added, we can use it here as a component for this fallback catch all route. And that ensures that if I enter some invalid path, I see that fallback content here. And the URL stays what it was before. So that's another important feature to know about.